The story begins with a young boy who finds solace in nightly conversations with a mysterious person over the radio, a figure who serves as his emotional support. Years later, at the start of the semester at Furin Academy, a teacher introduces himself to the class. In a moment of nervousness, the teacher bites his tongue but continues, explaining that the formerly all-girls school has decided to become co-ed this year. He warns the female students that the transition might be difficult but asks them to adapt. Everything seems to be proceeding normally until a male student suddenly stands up and interrupts, criticizing the teacher for biting his tongue. He argues that such a mistake makes the speech imperfect and necessitates an immediate restart. When the flustered teacher asks for his identity, the boy introduces himself to the entire class as Arisu Yamabuki, the heir to the Yamabuki group. He declares his mission to lead Japan into the future, a goal that requires absolute perfection. He oddly adds that his favorite fruit is the peach and claims to possess a great aura, though he insists he is also charming. However, he announces that he is not yet 100% perfect and requires the girl's assistance to bridge the final gap. To everyone's shock, he asks the female students to line up and whisper, "I love you," into his ear. 3 hours later, the male students confront Yamabuki, complaining that his stunt has caused the girls to look at all the boys with suspicion. Undeterred, Yamabuki asserts that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. A young lady then approaches him, noting his wealthy family background, and asks if his request was a method of seeking a girlfriend, offering herself as a candidate. Yamabuki stands and approaches her closely, only to analyze her voice. He politely rejects her, stating her voice lacks power, and excuses himself to go to the bathroom. He claims to be so perfect that his bodily functions operate on a strict schedule. While the other students are baffled by his eccentric personality, his friends from a previous school explain the truth. Yamabuki has been searching for a specific person since his second year of high school. He does not know what she looks like, so he relies entirely on his hearing to identify her voice. As Yamabuki prepares to use the restroom, he receives a message from his mother, which triggers a memory of his high school days. His only joy had been a radio program hosted by a girl named Apollo titled Mayonnaise Hearten. The show, which consisted of her talking about her daily school life, had very few listeners, but Yamabuki found strength in her broadcasts. She always ended the show by saying that doing the program gave her the strength to continue. Lost in thought, he is suddenly approached by a girl who whispers that she loves him. He initially dismisses it, focused on his schedule, but then pauses. The voice sounds remarkably similar to Apollo's. However, caught off guard and needing to relieve himself, he runs to the bathroom, leaving the identity of the girl unconfirmed. During lunch, the Radio Fusion Club begins its broadcast. The audio quality is terrible, marred by distortion from cheap microphones, but Yamabuki realizes the voice speaking sounds exactly like the one he is searching for. He recalls that Apollo stopped broadcasting at the end of his first year of high school and deleted her archives. However, based on the information he had gathered that she was his age and wanted to attend a girls' school with a sea view, he had calculated that she would likely be at Furin Academy. This deduction was the primary reason he enrolled the moment the school went co-ed. He stands before the broadcasting room door, feeling that he is a mere 1% away from completion. When he opens the door, he finds 4 different girls inside. He tries to speak, but one of them angrily reprimands him for entering without permission. Because the microphones are live, the entire school hears the altercation, with some students recognizing him as the boy who nearly defecated in the hallway. Yamabuki apologizes but focuses intently on the girls' voices. The problem is that they all share similarities with Apollo. The girl with black hair shares her intonation. The one with braids sounds like Apollo did when calm. The pink-haired girl sounds like Apollo when angry. And the white-haired girl whispers just like Apollo did when hiding from her parents. It has been 3 years, and his memory is hazy, leaving him insecure. The girls, assuming he wants to join the industry, explain their diverse goals. The white-haired girl wants to be a VTuber, the black-haired girl a presenter, the one with braids a singer, and the pink-haired girl a voice actress. However, they quickly distance themselves from him due to his earlier "I love you" stunt, which had been so distorted by rumors that some believe he wanted a lover to bear his children. The pink-haired girl calls him a degenerate and demands he leave. Yamabuki attempts to explain that he came to find someone, swearing on his family name that he has no hidden intentions other than to hear a specific voice. He asks if any of them is Apollo, but they look at him with confusion, as if he were talking about a brand of fried chicken. One girl tells him to leave, noting that only club members are allowed inside. Thinking quickly, Yamabuki declares himself an expert in voice work and points out the club's critical flaw: their equipment is terrible. He proposes that if they let him join, he will provide new, professional-grade equipment, revealing he recently made 1 million yen through an investment fund. Enticed by the offer, the black-haired girl and the aspiring VTuber agree, and even the girl with braids admits his voice is pleasant. Yamabuki boldly declares he will become the club president and take them to the top. The pink-haired girl objects, noting the current president is rich, but the others are already considering what to give him in return. They decide on a prank. They make Yamabuki turn around, stand behind him, and simultaneously whisper, "I love you." The combined sound strikes a chord in him, sounding exactly like Apollo's full voice. Flustered, he uses the excuse of needing to eat and flees. Alone, Yamabuki reflects on his true motivation. He remembers Apollo with affection, specifically a moment when he broke character and messaged her that he loved her too and wished her good night. As an adult, he is deeply embarrassed by this memory. Confessing to a stranger over the radio feels like the only mistake of his life. He wants to find her not just to reconnect, but to access her files and delete the evidence of his confession to prevent any future extortion against the Yamabuki group. Yamabuki is eventually welcomed into the broadcasting group, though he is treated as a glorified errand boy and nicknamed Buki. Despite the pink-haired girl's hostility and the toys they pile on him, he remains focused on observing them to identify Apollo. The next day, he encounters Uzuki, the beautiful student council vice president. While she records announcements, Yamabuki notes that she is a model student and highly popular. However, he critiques her performance. While her voice is like a silver bell, she stumbles over words and lacks technical skill. He scolds her for her errors, but her classmates defend her, finding her clumsiness charming, a concept of imperfection that Yamabuki fails to understand. He tentatively rules her out as Apollo. He then meets Nene, the pink-haired girl, who is asked to read lines from a manga that Apollo also loved. Nene is a star in class and an aspiring voice actress, but she too suffers from pronunciation issues. When she catches Yamabuki observing her, she loudly accuses him of being a stalker and a pervert to her friends. Yamabuki realizes that hearing a voice through a phone filter is different from reality. Complicating his search, he decides he must observe them more closely. His notes are eventually read by Kirino, the aspiring VTuber. Kirino is clumsy and partially blind to her surroundings, accidentally passing gas near him and falling down the stairs. When he tries to speak to her, she claims she is in the middle of a live stream. Yamabuki interrupts the stream to greet the audience and then leaves, unimpressed by her lack of professionalism. He grows frustrated, remembering how Apollo passionately dreamed of using her voice for a career, a dream he had promised to support by learning everything about the industry. He feels these girls are not taking that dream seriously. Later, during another disaster of a broadcast where Uzuki makes repeated mistakes, Yamabuki snaps. He storms the broadcasting room, shouting into the microphone that the club is a disaster. He tells the entire school that they will never progress if they continue to treat the girls like princesses rather than professionals. He declares that regardless of whether Apollo has forgotten their promise, he has not. He announces that he will guide the Radio Fusion members to perfection, whether they want to be presenters, VTubers, singers, or voice actresses, demanding an answer to his dedication. The girls kick him out of the room immediately. As he stands outside, dejected, he receives a notification. Apollo has started a transmission. Inside the room he just left, the voice comes to life. Apollo speaks to her listeners, admitting her heart nearly stopped because she never thought anyone would try to find her. She apologizes for hiding her identity. She reveals that although she complained about having few listeners in the past, she was truly happy just to have Yamabuki by her side. She confesses that the "I love you" she whispered earlier wasn't a prank or for the general audience, it was meant solely and exclusively for him. As the girls continue their broadcast late into the evening, laughter and confident chatter spilling freely from the club room, Arisu remained standing quietly outside the door. He hadn't meant to linger this long. At first, he told himself he was only passing by, that he was simply curious, but the longer he listened, the more difficult it became to leave. Their voices sounded different when they weren't aware of being watched, more relaxed, more genuine. Among them, one voice in particular tugged at something deep in his chest. Arisu checked his phone, and almost on cue, a message from Apollo appeared on the screen. The brief confirmation was enough to solidify what his instincts had already pieced together. One of the girls inside that room was a member of the broadcasting club. His fingers tightened around the device. For a moment, he considered opening the door and confronting them directly, demanding answers, but he stopped himself. That wasn't how he wanted this to unfold. Turning away from the club room, Arisu exhaled slowly. If fate had brought him this close, then he would respect it. He would find her properly, and when he did, he would fulfill the promise he had once made, no matter what it took. The following morning, before the sun had fully risen, Arisu gathered the girls at the beach. complaints erupted immediately. Sand clung to their shoes, the air was cold, and no one looked even remotely awake. Ignoring the groans, Arisu explained that running was excellent vocal training, strengthening lung capacity and breath control. Though unconvinced, the girls followed him along the shoreline, their voices gradually giving way to steady breathing. Midway through the jog, Shinobu suddenly burst into laughter and pointed skyward. A seagull soared overhead with an earbud caught in its beak. Arisu's eyes widened as he recognized it instantly. It was his. Without hesitation, he pivoted and began sprinting backward, chasing the bird with startling speed. The girls froze, watching in disbelief as he closed the distance while running in reverse. When he finally returned, earbuds secured, they were bent over gasping for air. Arisu, on the other hand, wasn't even sweating. Nani snapped at him afterward, accusing him of treating them like athletes instead of idols. Calmly removing his sunglasses, Arisu replied that he was simply the perfect person to turn them into professionals. Nani bristled, ready to argue, but Shinobu interrupted, admitting they had been slacking off lately. Since they had already discussed exercising together, she reasoned this training wasn't such a bad idea. Rika stepped forward then, her expression serious. She asked Arisu directly if they could trust him with their future. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her carefully, as if weighing the meaning behind her words. When he finally spoke, he said he was completely serious about wanting all of them to succeed. Nani demanded proof, and Arisu agreed, though he suggested they get breakfast first. The mood shifted instantly. The girls stiffened and attempted to retreat toward the clubroom. When Arisu asked why they were running, Nana snapped that they were sweaty and needed to change. Later, they met at a diner. Plates clinked softly as Arisu handed each girl a notebook. Inside were pages upon pages of detailed notes outlining their weaknesses, habits, and tailored improvement plans. He explained that every goal had been customized to suit their individual potential. The girls were stunned by the effort alone. Nene, however, stared in horror at the towering list of reading exercises assigned to her. As they flipped through the pages, they noticed something else. Each plan contained clear, concrete goals tied directly to their dreams. Rika froze when she saw her requirement, selling 50 CDs during a live performance. Arisu explained proudly that confidence couldn't be taught through theory alone. It had to be earned. Silence followed until Rika asked if Arisu had ever played an instrument. When he admitted he hadn't, she pointed out that performing live required courage he couldn't possibly understand. Arisu insisted she follow the plan regardless. Live performance, he argued, was something she would have to face eventually. When she asked if he had ever been nervous, he answered instantly that nervousness wasn't a trait found in his family. Rika stood up slowly, cupped his face, and calmly called him a liar. To her, he was all words and no experience. She saw no reason to follow advice from someone who had never stood on stage. Without another word, she left the diner. Nini explained bluntly that Arisu had crossed a line. Rika was talented enough to write her own music, and being lectured by someone without first-hand experience felt insulting. As the girls continued talking, they suddenly realized Arisu was gone. In truth, he was crouched beneath the table, his shoulders tense. Rika's words echoed painfully. After a moment, he let out a quiet laugh and pulled himself upright. If he wanted her to believe in him, then words weren't enough. He needed to hear her perform. The following Wednesday, Arisu went to the school courtyard after hearing rumors of Rika's weekly mini-concerts. A crowd of female fans had already gathered. When they spotted him, they immediately told him to leave. He tried explaining that he was a clubmate, but no one listened. Before the situation escalated, Rika stepped forward and admitted to the crowd that she was nervous. Arisu froze. It was the exact phrase Apollo used before singing. As Rika began her original song, the world seemed to fade away. Memories flooded back, nights spent listening to Apollo's streams, moments that had once brought him peace. By the time Rika finished, the resemblance felt undeniable. After announcing one final song request, Rika glanced at her backpack full of original compositions, then briefly at Arisu. She didn't want him to hear them. When the concert ended, she approached him and teasingly asked if his heart belonged to her. Arisu agreed instantly, apologizing for doubting her. Her expression hardened. She told him she didn't need his approval and walked away. Days passed without Arisu appearing. Rika felt uneasy. Hearing a commotion in the courtyard, she rushed over to find him surrounded by girls complaining loudly. Arisu explained he was performing to prove her wrong. Her gaze fell on his bandaged hand. Acting on impulse, she apologized to the crowd and announced the performance would be a duet. She stepped beside him, telling him to play whatever he wanted. Afterward, she teased him about finally feeling nervous. He denied it stubbornly. Smirking, She pressed her ear to his chest, catching him completely off guard. His racing heart betrayed him. On another day, Nene left the clubroom early. Suspecting trouble, Arisu followed her to an empty classroom where he overheard her reading a romance manga aloud. Her voice was soft but awkward. He bluntly told her her acting was terrible. Embarrassed, she revealed knightly love and passionately described its forbidden romance. Arisu noticed an audition notice on the cover. When she insisted on practicing alone, Arisu refused, embarrassing himself deliberately to match her vulnerability. Eventually, she admitted she wanted to audition but had no relationship experience. Without warning, Arisu knelt and asked her to be his girlfriend, only to reveal it was acting practice. After fierce resistance, she agreed to a 3-week fake relationship. Their public act shocked the school. Though they argued constantly, Shinobu believed it meant genuine closeness. On the final day, alone together, Nini prepared herself for the kissing scene, but Arisu refused, telling her she should only kiss someone she truly loved. She failed the audition. When Arisu fainted in despair, she kissed the book, hiding his face. When he confronted her afterward, she flipped him over her shoulder, screaming that she hated him. Shinobu later reassured him Nene's red ears told the real story. While the girls were changing in the club room, they neglected to lock the door. Arisu inadvertently opened it and saw them in a state of undress. He immediately scolded them for their carelessness, warning that if anyone else had entered, their reputations could have been ruined, though he quickly apologized for the intrusion. Once everyone settled down, they proceeded with the after-school announcements, with Rika taking over the duties after Shinobu had flubbed her lines earlier. Afterward, the girls decided they wanted something sweet and invited Arisu to join them. However, he declined, citing other obligations. Once he left, Nene suggested they follow him to get even. Although Rika hesitated, admitting she did not feel particularly embarrassed because she had been mostly hidden behind the others, Nene argued that they should investigate his private life out of curiosity. The group agreed, and Nene even gave their plan a dramatic name. They trailed Arisu out of school and onto a train. Nene attempted to snap photos from an adjacent car, hoping to catch him doing something suspicious, but he spent the entire ride simply reading a textbook. Eventually, they followed him into a cafe. While Nene remained focused on uncovering something scandalous, the other girls became distracted by the menu. They ducked into a distant seat to avoid detection. As Arisu began his shift, the girls wondered why he needed a part-time job. They overheard him speaking with a manager, revealing that he was taking extra shifts to fund upgrades for the broadcasting club's equipment. When the manager expressed concern about spending so much money on a club, Arisu explained that he wanted to invest in the 4 members. He noted that while they were far from professionals, each possessed a great voice. The manager teasingly asked if Arisu was in love with them, but he denied it, stating he only cared for them as fellow club members. Before the conversation could continue, the girls announced they were ready to order. Arisu turned toward the familiar voices, and Nene stepped forward to eerily take photos of his confused reaction. The girls decided that his embarrassment was sufficient payback. The following day, Arisu sat in the broadcast room, worrying that Nene might use the photos as blackmail. He was startled when Aiko entered the room much earlier than expected. Arisu panicked, fearing she was there to threaten him. But Aiko explained she wanted to show him something embarrassing of her own. She locked the door, unzipped her jacket, and produced a tablet to reveal her secret VTuber model. She asked for his help to improve her streams, noting that her recent viewership had stagnated. They scrolled through the comments, most of which described her content as boring. Arisu bluntly agreed, pointing out that her streams were usually very short and consisted of little more than greetings. Aiko became defensive, insisting those were merely her break-time streams and that she proudly designed her own model. Arisu unimpressedly countered that he already knew this because he had watched all her streams. Aiko called him a stalker, but Arisu protested that he could not be a stalker when her content was public. He showed her clips of her avatar, explaining that the real problem was the model's lack of emotion. He argued that with current technology, even a 2D model should be animated with varied expressions. Aiko looked down, admitting she lacked the technical skills for such work and that commissioning an upgrade would be too expensive. When Arisu reminded her that she had someone reliable nearby, she retorted that he was just their errand boy. Ignoring the insult, Arisu firmly told her to leave the technical work to him, instructing her to separate her avatar into different layers. The two spent the following days coordinating, tweaking settings, and holding strategy meetings to prepare for the debut of her upgraded model. One afternoon, as Aiko waited alone in the broadcast room, Arisu slammed the door open to announce the model was ready. He showed her the updated version, which could now copy her facial expressions using face tracking. He asked her to test it by laughing. Aiko complied, but her expression was subtle, making the avatar's laugh appear half-hearted. Arisu insisted she needed to exaggerate her emotions to connect with fans, but Aiko argued that her smile felt fake and admitted she was not good at showing emotion. In response, Arisu locked the door and suddenly started tickling her, demanding she let her emotions out. Aiko broke free and whirled around to scold him, only to freeze when she saw him wearing a pair of novelty glasses. She turned away to hide a chuckle. As Arisu tried to coax her into facing him, they lost their balance and tumbled to the floor, with Arisu pinning her down. He told her that the genuine smile she was making was exactly what her viewers wanted to see. Suddenly, Arisu heard Nene's voice from outside the window. He looked over to see a phone on a selfie stick held up for a video call. The girls had tried to enter the locked room and were now peering in. Seeing Arisu and Iko on the floor, Nene panicked and rushed to bang on the door. Iko's attempt to explain the situation only made it sound like Arisu had been doing something inappropriate. Without letting him defend himself, the girls tied him up. As Nene prepared to drag him to the police station, Aiko gave Arisu a small, sincere smile, thanking him for his hard work. Arisu smirked and told her that a VTuber's true charm lay in revealing the person behind the avatar. Aiko promised to show her viewers a genuine smile in her next stream. The next day, excitement built for Iko's new model debut. However, when the stream started, fans were confused as they couldn't see a difference. Inside the broadcast room, Arisu scolded Aiko for being stiffer than usual. Aiko admitted she was struggling but continued to explain the effort put into the avatar. Arisu realized the issue was not her inability to express herself, but her inability to do so in front of an audience. As the viewer count dropped, Arisu stepped in front of her with a sketchpad reading smile. Aiko panicked, her face freezing further. She silently mouthed a plea for help. Arisu paused the stream and scolded her for her stiffness, telling her to look at how much she was sweating. He suggested she remove her heavy layers to relax. When she hesitated, he teased her, calling her VTuber career a half-hearted hobby. Aiko snapped, shouting that she was serious and loved streaming because she loved interacting with viewers. Suddenly, Shinobu burst into the room, blurting out that the audio had never been muted. Nene realized Arisu had orchestrated the situation. Aiko panicked, thinking she was cancelled, but looked at the chat to see it overflowing with positive comments and a viewer count of over 2,000. Shinobu told her she owed the viewers an explanation. Remembering Arisu's advice about the appeal of a VTuber's true self, Iko took a deep breath. She jokingly performed a forget-it beam at the audience and ended the stream with a shy, nervous but genuine smile, which delighted her fans. Later, Arisu tuned into Iko's private stream from the boys' restroom. Iko brushed off his comment about his location but admitted she wanted to thank him using the new model. When Arisu complimented Aiko's real smile over the avatars, the model reverted to a poker face as Aiko hurriedly covered her blushing face behind the screen. She struggled to calm herself as she thanked the viewers and ended the broadcast. Shinobu led the planning meeting for the school's very first sports festival since the institution had become co-ed. However, the session took an awkward turn when one of the male council members pointed out that the handouts she had distributed were littered with her own selfies. Realizing her mistake, Shinobu panicked. She let out an embarrassed laugh and hurriedly asked everyone to keep the blunder a secret. Far from being annoyed, the male council members simply stared at her with dreamy expressions, finding her flustered reaction oddly adorable. Throughout the rest of the day, Shinobu was constantly approached by students needing assistance. Despite already having too much on her plate, she continued to smile and accepted every request. By sunset, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones as she made her way to the broadcast room, knowing she would be working late into the evening. The broadcast club meeting focused on assigning responsibilities for the upcoming festival. When the time came to delegate, Shinobu volunteered for the majority of the work, as most members seemed unwilling to take on the burden. When the group reviewed the full list of roles and realized the magnitude of her workload, they voiced their concerns. Shinobu, however, insisted she could handle it. Arisu then suggested the club host an event of their own. While some members shared ideas, others were unsure. Once again, Shinobu volunteered to write the proposal herself. After the meeting, the group agreed that karaoke would be a fun way to unwind, but Shinobu declined, citing her workload. Although Rika offered to help, Shinobu gently refused. Consequently, the members decided to head home rather than go out without her. Suddenly, Arisu locked eyes with Shinobu, startling her. He darted away, only to return moments later with his bag. He signaled for her to follow him to an empty staircase. Lowering his voice, Arisu asked her to keep his actions a secret. Shinobu grew nervous, half expecting a romantic advance, but Arisu instead offered her a lozenge, noting that her voice sounded strained. He reminded her that lozenges counted as candy, a violation of school rules, so he couldn't be caught. Shinobu felt flattered that he had noticed the change in her voice, but a strange pressure settled in when he casually mentioned that he was always watching and listening to her. Flustered, she promised to behave properly, which only made him suspicious. Arisu's expression turned serious as he told her she was overworking herself. Shinobu admitted it was an old habit born from a desire to be praised. She immediately tried to retract the selfish-sounding statement, but Arisu had already processed it. He observed that she had constructed a perfect image of herself to achieve that praise. Acknowledging that the pressure must be overwhelming, he assured her that she didn't need to worry anymore. He would draw everyone's attention to himself so she could rest. His tone softened as he told her she deserved a break and should rely on others, including him. Touched by his words, Shinobu grabbed his hand and asked him to have some fun with her. They ended up in the library, where she instructed Arisu to close his eyes. She tried to sneak a piece of chocolate into his mouth, but he caught a glimpse and pulled away to avoid breaking the rules. Shinobu smiled, amused that she had been caught. They settled into their seats, Shinobu's work spread out before them. She explained that the combination of working and snacking was oddly comforting. Arisu was amazed at the quantity of sweets she had smuggled in, realizing she had brought him along as insurance. She tried to feed him a Pocky stick to make him a fellow rebel, but he refused, though he promised to keep her secret. When Arisu realized the true weight of her workload, he offered to handle 2/3 of it, noting she looked sick. Shinobu called him reliable, but ultimately refused. She compared herself to a small strawberry chocolate, insisting her role was to enhance the sweetness of others rather than be the main flavor. She expressed admiration for the other club members, whose headstrong pursuit of talent-based dreams inspired her. She preferred to facilitate their success rather than chase her own desires. Finally, she confided that she needed to ensure this festival was a success because she secretly planned to quit the club by fall. The news caught Arisu off guard. Shinobu explained that she needed better grades to enter a prestigious university. Since most announcers came from top schools, she felt she had to sacrifice the club to lay the groundwork for her career. Although Arisu understood her logic, he still exploded. He bluntly called her weak, arguing that she could succeed without quitting. When she weakly countered that aiming for too much might leave her with nothing, Arisu crouched down to look her in the eye, asking if she truly saw him as just an errand boy. He reminded her that he was there to help her with everything, grades included. He insisted she could do whatever she wanted because she would always have him to lean on. Offering his hand, he reiterated his promise to lead her toward becoming a professional. Shinobu took his hand, allowing him to pull her up. Arisu admitted he couldn't stand the thought of her leaving, assuring her she was just as charming as the other members. Calming down, Arisu offered to help draft her proposal for the festival. Shinobu shyly asked him to keep their conversation a secret, not just the snacking, but her plans to quit and her insecurity. Instead of answering verbally, Arisu grabbed a handful of her snacks, breaking the rules to become her partner in crime. Shinobu giggled at the crumbs on his face, giddy over their shared secret. The next day, she pitched the messenger to the girls. They loved the idea, while she and Arisu exchanged subtle glances. On the day of the festival, Arisu shocked everyone by beating the athletes in the sprint, running straight to the broadcast table to announce his own victory. Later, during the scavenger hunt, Iko and Rika arrived at the table. To Arisu's surprise, both girls insisted he follow them based on their scavenger notes. When he asked what the notes said, they refused to answer. Not wanting to lose either of them, Arisu scooped both girls up and dashed ahead, earning shocked reactions from the crowd. They didn't win, and neither girl would reveal what was written on their papers, deeming it too embarrassing. For the chariot event, Shinobu's teammates were injured, but Arisu refused to withdraw. He entered them as a two-person team, carrying Shinobu on his shoulder. Nene, participating as a horse for another team, grew nervous as her squad targeted Shinobu. Although she hesitated, seeing Arisu and Shinobu so close sparked a pang of jealousy in her chest. Nene scolded herself for the feeling, nearly forgetting her role in the race. Amidst the chaos, Shinobu's bandana was snatched. Arisu dropped to his knees in despair, and as Shinobu comforted him, Nene realized just how close the two had become. During the intermission, the club gathered to rest and finalize the messenger. The event involved students using string phones to relay messages to the broadcast club for anonymous announcement. While Arisu suggested written messages, Shinobu insisted that hearing the sender's voice over the string was essential to convey the proper emotion. She revealed a flyer she had prepared, explaining they had to use guerrilla marketing. If they announced it officially, the teachers would shut it down immediately due to the unorthodox nature of the event. By using flyers, they hoped to build enough popularity to make it unstoppable before the faculty caught on, relying on Shinobu's good reputation as a shield. Shinobu smiled, admitting she wanted to create a cherished memory. However, just as they were about to distribute the flyers, their advisor, Lemon, entered the room, already aware of their plans. Lemon reviews the proposal for the lunch broadcast event but quickly denies it, breezily informing the girls that she has no interest in getting involved in trouble. Arisu attempts to intervene, arguing for the merit of their idea, but Lemon shuts him down immediately, reiterating her general distaste for allowing boys into the club. Shinobu steps in to save the situation. She bows deeply and begs Lemon to reconsider, shrewdly adding that the event's success would reflect positively on Lemon as their advisor. Shinobu points out how well the club has performed during the festival, suggesting this event could be the crowning achievement of Lemon's mentorship. Enticed by the prospect of personal glory, Lemon's eyes brighten. She sits back and grants permission, though her skepticism returns when she hears their promotional plan. The girls intend to distribute flyers, but Lemon explains that Samejima, the strict PE teacher, is patrolling the lunch hour to keep boys and girls separated. They would be caught instantly. However, Lemon offers a solution. She will distract Samejima for 10 minutes. Out on the field, Samejima is aggressively barking orders when Lemon approaches. She suggests he take a break, and while he initially refuses, her charm quickly wears him down. As Samejima wavers, the girls rush out to distribute flyers. They soon realize, however, that they are moving too slowly to reach enough students in the allotted time. Nani quickly calls a huddle and proposes a bold change of plans. Moments later, the girls re-emerge in full cosplay. The spectacle immediately draws a massive crowd. Even Arisu is impressed by their boldness, finally understanding why Nini asked him to stay back. However, the victory is short-lived. Lemon comes sprinting toward Arisu, with an eager Samejima hot on her heels. Her charm offensive has worked too well, and she can no longer hold him back. Arisu quickly ushers the girls into the safety of the broadcast room just as the crowd disperses. With the promotional phase complete, Rika reviews the procedure one last time. They have darkened the classroom next door to serve as a waiting room. Participants will step out, use a string phone connected to the broadcast room, and deliver their messages to Shinobu, ensuring total privacy. Shinobu takes her position by the broadcasting table, nervous but ready. The first knock sounds, and she picks up the receiver. She hears a voice threatening a dare if she flubs her lines. Realizing it's a prank from her own club members, she checks the door, only to find them walking away laughing. She realizes she couldn't identify the speaker because the string phone completely distorts voices, a happy accident that guarantees true anonymity. Lunch break begins. Shinobu announces the start of the special event over the PA system. Samejima becomes suspicious, but Lemon is already prepared to intercept and distract him again. The first real participant steps up. Shinobu receives the message and broadcasts it. A girl from Class 2A is confessing to a boy named Shindo. She asks him to stand if he accepts her feelings. In the cafeteria, Shindo spits out his drink in shock but stands up without hesitation. The student body erupts in cheers. Even the teachers in the faculty room seem amused, noting that only Samejima would object if he weren't currently occupied by Lemon. The success of the first confession breaks the dam. Students begin lining up, eager to confess without the pressure of face-to-face rejection. Inside the waiting room, Nini watches the excitement from the window. Rika scolds her to keep the room dark, praising Shinobu's idea for giving awkward students a safe platform to speak. Outside, a second confession occurs, though this one ends in rejection. Inside the darkened room, Iko turns the conversation inward, asking Nini and Rika if they have anything to confess. Both girls panic, assuming she means romance. Sensing their anxiety, Iko clarifies that it doesn't have to be a love confession. Relieved, Nini admits there is a boy she wants to thank and apologize to, though their constant bickering makes it difficult for her to be honest. Rika shares that she has been cold to someone lately and wants to clear the air. When asked about her own confession, Iko reveals she recently went silent during a voice chat with a friend and worries she made him anxious. She simply wants to tell him she is fine. As the broadcast continues outside, the girls reflect on the unspoken words they carry, hidden safely in the dark. Before the girls can continue, more students arrive at the waiting room. The team welcomes them eerily, keeping up the act, though their thoughts drift to Eris's absence. Suddenly, a piercing feedback screech blasts through the school speakers. Shinobu panics as the broadcast equipment malfunctions. She frantically manipulates the controls, but her lack of technical knowledge only worsens the situation. Overwhelmed and convinced she is about to fail yet again, she crouches down in terror. The other girls rush in to find her in tears. Rika and Eiko inspect the console but quickly realize they cannot repair it. Reluctantly, they suggest stopping the event. Shinobu refuses to give up. She throws open the broadcast room window, declaring she will shout the announcements herself. The girls try to stop her, warning she will ruin her throat, but she is determined. Just then, Arisu appears in the doorway, holding a megaphone. He casually reveals he swiped it from Samjima with Lemon's help and suggests it as their best alternative. Overcome with relief, Shinobu hugs him in front of the group, thanking him for always saving her. Arisu leans close, whispering that he is still her partner in crime, and hands her the device. Reinvigorated, Shinobu announces through the open window that the event will proceed with a special analog twist. She invites the students to gather in the courtyard, and the crowd eagerly migrates to hear better. As the girls scramble to their stations, Arisu slips away. Shinobu continues the broadcast from the window. She reads a bizarre confession about a hole in a wall, causing the crowd to erupt in laughter. Meanwhile, Arisu joins the students in the courtyard, now back in his regular uniform and ready to support the club full-time. Shinobu announces the final confession. The mood shifts abruptly as she explains that the confessor wants to apologize for betraying someone devoted to her 3 years ago. She reads that the sender regrets breaking a promise and was shocked to hear his voice again. Arisu feels a sinking sensation. The story mirrors his history with Apollo perfectly. Suddenly, Shinobu lowers the megaphone. In her own clear, unamplified voice, she calls out Arisu's first name and says, "I love you," immediately raising the megaphone again to formally conclude the event. The crowd buzzes with curiosity, but Arisu is left reeling. Apollo had always ended her radio broadcasts with that phrase, but this felt pointedly personal. Arisu heads straight to the club room to find the truth. The girls in the waiting room look restless, but Arisu spots Shinobu in the hallway and confronts her. She insists she didn't write the message and has no idea who did. Seeing her hands shaking, Arisu abandons the interrogation. Instead, he congratulates her on the event's success, noting she didn't flub a single line. The praise breaks her defenses. Shinobu bursts into tears, confessing how terrified she was of wasting the club's time. She hugs him tightly, deciding that if a teacher scolds them for the embrace, they will simply face it together. Later, the school begins its post-festival cleanup. Lemon supervises the students but pointedly refuses to do any manual labor herself. Arisu rushes back to the club room to help, fearing the girls will scold him for slacking off. Just then, his phone chimes, a message from Apollo telling him to come to the broadcast room. He sprints there immediately. Upon arrival, he finds the string phone still hanging outside the door. He picks it up and hears Apollo's voice greeting him. She confesses she is using this method because she is still too scared to face him directly. When asked about the final confession, Apollo admits it was hers. She is tired of hiding the fact that she ran away from her radio show. Arisu jokes that she should just show herself, but he freezes when she replies that she intends to do exactly that. She reveals that by inviting him here, she has finally decided to reveal her true identity to him. After the sports festival, the broadcast club celebrated their success at their advisor Lemon's apartment. Having changed out of their uniforms to avoid any trouble, the girls were ready to hang out simply as friends. Rika led the celebratory toast, praising everyone's hard work, especially Shinobu's, before jokingly declaring that Lemon would foot the bill as punishment for slacking off on her advising duties. Accepting her fate, Lemon looked around and teased the girls for clearly dressing up to impress Arisu. While the others hurriedly denied it, Rika boldly admitted she had chosen her outfit specifically hoping for his compliment. However, when Lemon turned to Arisu, he was already fast asleep from sheer exhaustion. After Rika playfully scolded his unconscious form for missing out on her outfit, the girls moved him comfortably to the bed and headed out to buy food. Iko was the first to return. After putting her purchases in the fridge, she lay quietly beside the sleeping Arisu. Her mind drifted to the hug he had shared with Shinobu earlier, and she wondered aloud if the two were already dating. Lost in thought, she leaned in close. Moments later, Nene arrived. Spotting Iko's shoes, she walked in just in time to see Iko leaning over Arisu as if to kiss him. Nene finally made her presence known, startling Iko mid-movement. The two sat awkwardly at the edge of the bed. Despite feeling she shouldn't care, Nini subtly probed about what Iko was trying to do. Desperate to change the subject, Iko blurted out a question about whether Nene had ever kissed anyone. After a stunned pause, Nene honestly admitted she had with Arisu, though she clarified a manga had been awkwardly sandwiched between them. Impressed by Nene's maturity, Iko was caught off guard when Nene bluntly asked if she liked Arisu, bringing up the near kiss. Blushing furiously, Iko confessed she wasn't sure, as she had never felt this way before. Turning the tables, she asked Nene how she felt. Nene firmly stated she hated boys, but reluctantly admitted Arisu might be an exception. Before they could dwell on this, they heard Shinobu calling out. Panicking, Iko and Nene dove under the bed. Shinobu entered the seemingly empty room and sat beside the sleeping Arisu. Softly, she apologized for acting on her feelings during their earlier embrace, admitting she had actually liked it. She then began to apologize for lying to him about the confession event, but the sound of Rika entering the apartment cut her off. In a blind panic, Shinobu scrambled under the bed, shocked to find Nene and Aiko already huddled there. Rika walked in, assuming she was alone. Spotting the sleeping Arisu, she casually changed into more conservative clothes, much to the horror of the three girls hiding below. Rika then approached the bed, annoyed that Arisu hadn't complimented her earlier. Gently touching his fingers, she noticed a familiar callus, confirming he was still playing the guitar. She whispered that she was writing a new song, but the quiet moment was shattered when Aiko suddenly sneezed. Realizing the sound came from beneath her, Rika peered under the bed and confronted the three eavesdroppers. When Arisu finally woke up, he was greeted by the girls sitting around the table, looking unusually depressed. He asked if they had fought, and they reluctantly confessed their dilemma. Wanting to help him recover from his exhaustion, every single one of them had secretly bought him a whole cake, leaving them with nothing but sweets for dinner. Not wanting to disappoint their sweet gestures, Arisu bravely declared he had a massive sweet tooth and began digging in. The girls watched with growing concern as he visibly struggled to stomach 4 entire cakes. Just as he managed the impossible feat, Lemon cheerfully strolled in, proudly announcing she had brought a cake too. Slumped on the couch in agony, Arisu could only grimace as Lemon insisted he eat hers as well. Desperate to avoid eating another bite of cake, Arisu quickly suggested they play a game to mark the occasion. Lemon agreed, bringing out a deck of cards and a Jenga set. She ruthlessly declared the stakes. Whoever lost had to eat the final cake. Grabbing a beer, Lemon then immediately opted out, claiming she didn't consume carbs after 8 p.m. Wanting to avoid any strategy games where Arisu would have the upper hand, Nini immediately chose Jenga. With the tower assembled, Nini took the first turn. She spent an agonizing amount of time carefully extracting her block, only to watch in stunned silence as the other girls breezed through their turns with effortless speed. When it was Arisu's turn, he asked if he could poke the tower before making a move. Lemon granted permission, recognizing his familiarity with classic Jenga tactics. Casually mentioning that his family used to play, Arisu smoothly extracted an easy block and placed it on top with a confident smirk. Nene bristled in annoyance at his certainty, while Rika simply looked disappointed that he still hadn't noticed her carefully chosen outfit. As the girls chatted and Nini agonized over her next move, a sugar crash hit Arisu and his mind began to wander. He looked at his clubmates, certain that one of them was the mysterious Apollo he had spoken to in the clubroom that afternoon. He recalled their earlier conversation. Apollo had been perfectly willing to reveal her identity, but Arisu had stopped her. He wanted to uncover the truth on his own. Having her just hand him, the answer felt like a defeat. He boldly declared that by the time they all became professionals, he would figure out who she truly was. When Apollo questioned if his only goal was to make her a professional, Arisu admitted his motives were far more personal. Hearing all the members' voices had given him a new dream: to become a producer who created music, television programs, and anime, all so he could eventually work alongside her. Apollo had found his grand declaration amusing, if slightly self-centered. Instructing him to close his eyes, she opened the door. Arisu panicked at the risk of her being seen, but when he finally opened his eyes, Apollo had already vanished. Nene calling his name snapped Arisu back to the present. He blinked in shock at the table. While he was spaced out, the 4 girls had formed a temporary alliance, deliberately constructing an impossibly unstable, twisted Jenga tower guaranteed to collapse at the slightest touch. Arisu loudly protested the blatant rule-breaking, but Lemon merely shrugged, casually revealing she had given them permission. Muttering about Lemon's questionable credibility as an educator, Arisu faced the tower as Nini impatiently demanded he take his turn. Realizing his usual tactics were useless, Arisu relied purely on sight. He carefully scanned the precarious structure, locked onto a center block, and slowly pulled it free. For one agonizing, suspended second, the tower remained perfectly still. The girls gasped, genuinely believing he might have pulled off a miracle. Then, in slow motion, the wooden blocks tilted and crashed directly toward him. Nene erupted into a triumphant cheer the moment the pieces hit the table. Moments later, the group stepped out of Lemon's apartment, bathed in the light of a full moon. Trailing slightly behind the girls, Arisu's thoughts drifted back to the afternoon once more. After Apollo had slipped out of the clubroom, he had kept his eyes closed, hoping she was still lingering in the corridor. To the empty air, he had confessed that he was a longtime fan, overjoyed to have found her and heard her voice again. He also thought of Shinobu, grateful to her for delivering Apollo's proxy confession directly to him the very first time Apollo had ever addressed him by his name. Back in the present, Arisu felt a nagging unease that he still couldn't pinpoint Apollo's voice among the girls. Noticing him lagging, the group paused. Shinobu gently pointed out his exhaustion. Arisu deflected, insisting he was no more tired than they were after the immense effort they had all put into the sports festival. His tone softened as he told them they should be incredibly proud of their success. Though Neni initially bristled at his slightly bossy tone, she softly agreed. She and Rika chimed in, admitting that despite the difficulty, they had loved the proxy confession event and wanted to run it again. Surprised and touched by their enthusiasm for her idea, Shinobu smiled and sincerely thanked the club for bringing her event to life. The group exchanged warm smiles. Arisu smiled too, but it faltered slightly as a final memory surfaced. Apollo's parting whisper, spoken while his eyes were still closed, promising she would cherish his words.